Hello friends, my name is Katie. Welcome back to my channel, Life Between Words. Today's video is full of shame and regret. I'm just kidding. It's just a video of the 11 books that I didn't read this year, but really wanted to. I don't know why I sometimes choose not to pick up books and pick up other books instead. Sometimes I'm less excited about those other books. These books that I have here, I was really excited all year long to read them, and I never read them. But I'm not the fastest reader. I'm not someone who reads 100 books a year. Last year, I think I did get close. I read like 70, but that's still 30 books away from 100. This year, I think I read 50 some. I read maybe a book a week this year, and that seems pretty good and reasonable for this stage in my life. This is my cat, if you see her tail. Anyway, let's just see what books I have that I wish that I'd read this year. The first one I have here is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. When this book first came out, it was getting a lot of buzz, and I've since heard some more mediocre reviews of it, particularly having to do with the writing style. I was reading a review where someone was imitating the writing style, and it was hilarious. It actually reminded me a lot of the writer who wrote The Sun Also Rises. Hey Siri, who wrote The Sun Also Rises?
Ernest Hemingway wrote The Sun Also Rises.
It reminded me actually a little bit of the voice of Ernest Hemingway. Anyone who's read this, is that maybe a correct interpretation of his writing style? I really don't know. I haven't even opened the book to see for myself. But the reason that I wanted to read this book is that it's really timely. My understanding of the book is that it's about refugees, but there's a little bit of a fantasy twist to the story, and it takes place in the Middle East. I feel like the book was very timely in 2017. Not that it won't be timely in 2018, but it just felt like 2017 was the year to be thinking about refugees, and I really wanted to read this, and I didn't, and now I'm filled with shame. The next book just came out, I think, in November, and it was Tom Hanks' Uncommon Type. This is a collection of short stories written by Tom Hanks, the Tom Hanks of, like, You've Got Mail and Forrest Gump, that Tom Hanks. And I love Tom Hanks. I love him so much. I've loved him since I was a little girl. I mean, how can you not love Tom Hanks? He's wonderful. The common thread between all these short stories is that they somehow involve a typewriter in one way or another. It may not be the central focus of the story, but there's a typewriter in it, and I love that. I know Tom Hanks well enough to know that he has a fascination, he collects typewriters, and so I just think that's really charming, and I really wanted to read this book this year and didn't get to it. I've mentioned this next book before, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I read my first Taylor Jenkins read this summer. I've heard about her for a really long time. When this book came out, oh no, I bent the pages. When this book came out, I remember hearing buzz about it, and I remember hearing that it's very different from her other books. Her other books are like straight up contemporary kind of, but adult fiction, generally with some deeper themes and exploring some topics that make you think more than other women's fiction, kind of maybe like Liane Moriarty. I think maybe her books aren't quite as acerbic as Liane Moriarty's, or like funny, but definitely thoughtful. Anyway, this book is historical fiction, and it's about a Hollywood actress telling all to a reporter about her life and the loves of her life that include her 7 husbands and other people. I have heard wonderful things about this book. I really want to read it. I know that it's a page turner. I have a feeling I'm gonna love it, and I'm so sad that I didn't get to it. Part of the reason is because I kind of wanted to read some of her other books first, but I really just want to read this book. Next we have a tome, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This came out at the beginning of 2017, and I can't believe I didn't read it right away. It sounded fascinating to me. It sounded right up my alley, and it is big. It's like, it is definitely over 500, oh no, it's not over 500 pages, but it's almost 500 pages. It's a multi-generational family saga following a Korean family living in Japan, and I feel so sorry for myself that I didn't read it because I just think I'm gonna love it. Alas, I have had North and South sitting on my bedside stand for months, since at least April, and I never read it. One of my goals in 2017 was to read more classics. That didn't happen. I did read one classic. I read Middlemarch, but I didn't read North and South, and I really wanted to. Elizabeth Gaskell is an author that I've heard described as kind of a mix between Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte. She's a little more gritty than Jane Austen and a little less gritty than Charlotte Bronte, if that makes sense. She's not quite as romantic as Charlotte Bronte, and by that I don't mean romance, because her books do have romance in them, like a romance at the heart of the story, but they don't have the dark gothic tone that Charlotte Bronte does in her books. I think. I could be wrong about that. I've never read Elizabeth Gaskell, but she's an author that I've heard wonderful things about. And like I said, this was sitting on my nightstand all year long, and I never picked it up. Why? Why didn't I pick it up? I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say that I still haven't read Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn trilogy. Here's the excuse that I'm giving myself. I didn't want to start another series when I'm in the middle of so many other series, but in truth, that's just kind of the reality of the reading life. If you read as much as I read, you end up in the middle of a bunch of series, and that's okay. So I feel like in the back of my mind, that was the reason why I didn't pick up The Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, but it's not a really very good reason. I'm so sad that I still haven't read this. I feel like I might be the only person in the world who reads fantasy to have not read the Mistborn trilogy. It'll happen sometime. This next book is a little bit random. It's called When Crickets Cry by Charles Martin. I heard about this book on Anne Bogel's podcast, What Should I Read Next? I get a lot of my book recommendations from that podcast. I love it so much. One of Anne's guests talked about this book as one of her favorites, like one of her all-time favorites. It's the book that she recommends to everyone. When she described it, it reminded me a lot of Peace Like a River. Some of the themes, the way she described it reminded me of that, just like faith and miracles, and that it was beautifully written and really profound, and said some really deep things about the human condition, and those are all sort of buzzwords for me. I immediately bought the book. I think that this might be considered Christian fiction. I don't generally read what is labeled as Christian fiction, but this is about grief. So I'm not sure that what usually puts me off of Christian fiction is going to be found in this book. I don't know. I wish I had read it this year and could tell you for sure, but I didn't. This summer, I planned on reading The Jane Austen Project by Kathleen Flynn. This is a book that came out this year, and I didn't read it. I feel like Jane purists might balk at it. Balk? I should look up that word. I don't really know how to pronounce it. But anyway, I feel like Jane Austen purists might stick up their nose at it because the premise is a little silly, but also I love it. This book involves two people who are sent on a mission back in time, and their mission has two elements to it. The first is that they are to steal a manuscript from Jane Austen, I believe a manuscript that has disappeared in time. And then the other aspect of their mission is to diagnose Jane Austen herself, to figure out what illness it was that she died from, because to this day, we don't know. Although there has been speculation. I think just in the last year I read an article about what might have caused her death, and they were speculating that it was poison from her writing utensils, like maybe the ink. Anyway, yeah, so the premise is a little silly, but also it's gotten pretty good reviews, and I'm super pumped about it. I think that it's going to be really fun. I am so sad that my plans to read it this summer fell through, and I don't even have a good excuse as to why they did. I have heard amazing things about Castle of Water by Dane Huckelbridge. Dane Huckelbridge himself describes this book as, what does he describe it as? Funbrow. He set out to create a page-turning literary fiction book. So a literary fiction book that was also fun to read. This book follows some characters who have been in a plane crash and are trying to survive on a deserted island. That premise alone got me hooked, because I am a sucker for survival stories, because I think survival stories have a lot to do with how do we maintain our humanity in the face of crisis. Not unlike Station 11, this book likewise deals with some really heavy themes, but it does it with a light touch. That sounds like perfection to me. I'm so excited to read this. It feels like such a shame that this book hasn't been read, because I would love to tell you guys to go out and read it right now. But of course, I haven't read it. Marlena by Julie Buntin. This book, I believe, is a YA book about a toxic friendship. And one of the girls in this friendship is looking back on this friendship. I think that it's very tragic. Like, I think one of the girls dies. I could be wrong. It's kind of a coming-of-age book, I think, which I do like coming-of-age books. I am not a huge fan of really angsty teenagers, so we're just gonna have to see what I think of it. The reason that I wanted to read this book this year is that Molly from over at Molly Reads read it this year and loved it. This is one of her favorite books from the year, and I love Molly, and so I wanted to read Marlena. And I'm sorry to say that it's just collected dust on my shelves. I have one more book. It's a nonfiction book, and it's called Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran. This is a nonfiction book that takes place during the 1920s, when the Osage Indians were some of the richest people per capita because their land was on top of an oil field. And then one day they just start to die in kind of mysterious ways. Like, they don't seem related, but people keep dropping dead. And so they call in the fledgling FBI to figure things out. And so this book sort of follows the trajectory of this mystery and then also the beginnings of the FBI. I've heard amazing things about this book. Pretty much everyone I know who's read it has loved it. It's made a ton of lists of best books of the year. Like, I was listening to On Point, which is a podcast put out by NPR, and it was on there. I've heard a lot of booktubers talk about it, and they've loved it. It's narrative nonfiction, which is my favorite. I love when nonfiction is kind of telling a story. I know I'm gonna love this book. I know it. I have a feeling that if I had read it, it would have been one of my favorites of the year. I am so sad that I didn't read it. Every month, I would pick it up and say, I'm gonna read it this month. And then I didn't. Why? I don't know. I have no idea what was taking precedence over this book. I have no idea what was taking precedence over the rest of these books. And there's a million other books that I could have said the same thing for. I had a lot of books this year that I wanted to read and then didn't. And I have no good reason for it other than I just picked up other books, because that's what we do. We have to make a choice to read something, right? I wish I could consume all the books that I wanted all at the same time. But alas, I cannot. I am just one person. That is my tale of books I wanted to read this year and didn't make time for. Books that I wish I'd made time for in 2017. There will be a whole new list of books like this in 2018, I'm sure. I hope that you're having a great week. I am about to head up to my parents' cabin. My younger brother is flying in from Seattle. I haven't seen him in, my gosh, like almost a year. I miss him so much. And then my other brother and his family is coming up. We'll see how that goes. It's not a super huge cabin. It's also like -7 Fahrenheit here. And so up north, I imagine it's even colder. And the cabin doesn't get any warmer than like 62 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's gonna be pretty chilly, and we're just gonna have to hunker down and snuggle up. It'll be fun. I will talk to you all later. Have a great day. Bye.